Oh no.
Sorry. Sorry about that. How are
Hi.
you guys today? Thanks for
Good. How you
talking to
doing?
us. Good. I'm Alyssa from the Mommyhood Chronicles. So my question to Chris is, why did you want to take on this film? And what was the inspirations for it?
I think it's been something that has been inside of me my whole life. When I was a kid, I loved the stop motion fantasy films, the Sinbad movies, all the Harryhausen films. I loved the 70s version of King Kong was my King Kong. I
Yep.
love that movie. Love Raiders. I love Lawrence of Arabia, Clash of the Titans, all that stuff where characters leave the known world, venture out of the unknown. And so there was always this nagging voice that got louder and louder over the years that said, wouldn't it be cool to try to make something like that, a big sweeping epic adventure in animation? And eventually the voices got so loud I just couldn't drown them out anymore, and I had to go for it. And I suppose the rest is history.
Thank you. It was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Angela?
Oh, did we lose Angela?
There we go. Congratulations, Chris. I love this movie so much. We watched it last night.
Awesome.
And I had a question about the character development. How do you help your characters or actors get into their personalities and character?
Well, that's a really good question. I'd love to get also Zaris's thoughts on that. I think one of the things that is very different between animation and live action is, obviously in live action, generally you'll have the actors together in their costumes and their sets, and they really get a sense of the place and the moment that they're creating together. In animation, they don't have the benefit of those things. It's generally just them in the room, and they'll be asked to go from teleport from one place to the next, one emotion to the next. And so it's really incumbent on the director to try to articulate what they're experiencing physically and emotionally, and what the circumstances are. But then there's an onus on the actors to take all of that and really sort of take it in and build off of that, and so they don't have the other actors, they don't have the place in front of them, so they have to conjure all of that. And so after a 3 or 4 hour recording session, our actors are generally pretty wiped out. But I'd love to hear Zaris's thoughts on that.
Me, to get into Maisie, it was really, I don't really know what I did. I think just getting into the booth really helps, because it's just kind of like a transformation. And from like the first line, as we record more and more, I just become more of her and just get more comfortable. But I do tend to like go a bit quiet before we start and kind of focus, I guess. I guess that's something everyone would do. But yeah.
You probably get a sense Zaris is obviously a really sweet kid, but once it's time for a take, she becomes this other person. It's an immediate and amazing transformation. And I find that a lot of the director's job, especially with actors who haven't done a lot of animation, is to let them know it's okay to mess up. It's not the end of the world, and don't let that get you down. Just keep rolling and maybe have fun with it. And a lot of times if the actor has a hitch or a stumble, sometimes those can be the best takes, because that means there's truth and spontaneity in it that can sometimes translate nicely into the animation. So there's no such thing as a bad take in animation, I would say.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Cami?
Hi guys, I'm Kami from the MamaDiaries.com. So Zaris, I love your character as Maisie. She's such a strong lead female role, and I think a lot of girls will look up to her. I love that. What made you want to be part of this movie?
Well, if I be honest, when I first I got the description of the film in the email, and it sounded really, really amazing. I didn't know much about Maisie initially, but it's something that I discovered as we went on. And as we did go on, I became more and more proud to be a part of it. And especially playing Maisie as well, she's such a strong character. like you said, a lot of people will look up to her, a lot of young girls, and just having that in itself, it makes me really happy. And yeah.
Mhm.
Amy?
There's hi, I'm Amy from As the Bunny Hops, and wanted to follow up on that. What was your reaction when you saw Maisie for the first time? Because we know representation is so important, and there's going to be a lot of little girls who are going to be able to watch this and see themselves in that. So, what was your reaction?
I nearly cried when I first watched it all. I was so emotional because if I, like younger me, had seen a character like Maisie, especially because I love animation so much, so seeing that kind of character, it would have really, especially the way she is, she's very strong and confident, it would have made me more confident and also more happier to be myself. And so just knowing that a lot of little girls will experience that makes me very, very happy. So I was so excited when I saw her curls, her skin, and it's amazing.
Vina?
Hello. So my question is more like this story is really about like monsters and like a lavish like fantasy epic. What sort of childhood books kind of inspired this or like kind of brought you into this story?
Well, for me, Treasure Island was the one that I loved as a kid and reread over and over and over again in the course of making this story. It really just helped take me to that place, and there's sort of there's that personality to the language that I really want to try to capture in the film. So that was the one. And I remember when I was a kid, that there was no internet when I was a kid. So the library was my internet, and we would go to the library and I kept checking out the same book over and over and over again. It was just called Pirates. And I can really picture the cover of it very vividly. There was this big swashbuckling pirate hanging off the side of the ship. And I would, as a ritual, I would go I knew where that book was in the library. I would go and I would retrieve it and check it out. And then probably, a few more books, but always that one. So there was always this fascination with seafaring folk when I was a kid.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, back to Melissa.
Hi. Kind of going on that. How did you come around with to creating the looks and giving them the specific looks for the monsters?
Oh, well, that is a months-long process, maybe years-long process of back and forth with our designers. A lot of people may not realize how much research goes into it. A lot of times we'll spend a lot of time looking at marine mammals and looking at video of mammals. We looked at a lot of walruses and seals and whales and killer whales. We looked at a lot of, we specifically looked at seals and walruses because we needed to create creatures that could be on sea and land, but were more comfortable in the water. And so what does that do to their physiology? And we really try to take that seriously, because if it feels like the anatomy is fudged or wouldn't work, the audience senses that, especially when the rest of the world feels so plausible and realized, and that the physics and the gravity all kind of make sense. So you can't just kind of draw whatever you want. It has to make sense in this world. And so I meant one specific thing is that the creatures that go underwater have to be fairly frictionless in their design, right? So they have to be very streamlined. So that was a big part of it. So that's always a given. It has to feel plausible and feel like it makes sense. And then beyond that, we invite our designers to get imaginative and oftentimes design for a personality. And we wanted our main character, our main monster, Red, to feel like she was the queen of the beasts, and so we would look at animals like lions and tigers that sort of had that majesty to them and that almost a feeling of wisdom to them. Or we'll design to the moment. If it's a particularly fun moment or a more intense, scary moment, we'll design accordingly.
Thank you.
Angela?
Okay, this question is for Zaras. Maisie is fearless, adventurous, and she's spunky. Do you think that you have any characteristics similar to her?
Well, I definitely say not from the completely fearless side. I think that's something I'm working on. I struggle with anxiety, so it makes things like that really difficult. Um, so definitely not in that way, but Maisie, I'd say one thing I am similar to is she, I think it's her passion for things that drive her to do things no matter what the outcome is. And I'm very passionate, and like when she loves something, she really loves it. And that's the same with me. So I'd say similar in that way. So there's similarities and then there isn't.
Mhm.
I love
Yeah,
that.
I think just to follow up on that, there was an amazing transformation that I would watch happen where Zaris would come in and be her very sweet self, and then when whatever the moment was, she would become that moment. She's obviously a great person, a great kid, but very, as she said, passionate about her acting, and she can sing and dance and act, and she is really driven towards that. It's not something that's passive for her. It's something that's really important to her. And so I think some of that drive and passion, it was easy for her to tap into that and give it to Maisie.
Yeah, she was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can't imagine the character without Zaris Angel performing it. It would be, when someone really nails a performance where it's impossible to imagine anyone else doing it. That's what we have
Right.
in this movie.
Yeah, no,
Aw,
it was
thank
brilliant, brilliantly.
Emmy,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cami.
Hi, Chris. So I was wondering if you did any sort of research, whether it be like piracy or mythology to prepare for the story.
Yeah, we did a lot. We really wanted the world to feel big and immersive and complete. And we wanted to feel like it had a history. And for this movie, more than anyone I've worked on in the past, the experience of being in the place was going to be a big part of the experience of watching the movie. So I would cite things like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings or Blade Runner as movies that had a very, or shows that had a sense of a really complete and realized world with a history. So that meant we had to know our stuff. And so we went to visit maritime museums, and I got to tromp around on ships and pull on ropes and try to understand how they work. And our teams got to understand how these ships function as far as the practicality of it, but also just how the crew functions, the organism that is the ship and the crew together, how that all works. And we had an amazing consultant in Gordon Lacko, who was the consultant on Master and Commander, which is cited as one of the most authentic representations of life at sea that's ever been on film. And so he is very knowledgeable. So I could turn to him and ask him pretty much anything, like how the ships work or what the language would have been, things like terminology and even sometimes the flavor of the dialogue he was helpful with. So we definitely, I really wanted, as I was making this movie, I was like, I want the people who love ships to feel like we got it right, And so you want to hold yourself to the highest possible standard always.
Thank you.
Amy.
Chris, the film has really amazing animation that at times really looks bordering on live action. And yet everything is so grounded, the costumes, the settings, and that kind of 17th century aesthetic. How did you find the balance with that historical accuracy and all the modern technology, and how vividly you were able to render everything?
That's always a topic of conversation, is how caricatured is this world as far as its look, but also the animation, and sometimes animation can be very broad and like a Hotel Transylvania series or the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. You can really push it, and for certain stories, that's exactly the way to do it. Ours, we wanted to feel a little bit more grounded, a little bit more plausible, as far as the feeling of gravity, the feeling of peril. Those were things that sort of dictated where we wanted to be on that spectrum. But we didn't want it to feel sort of tight and rigid and not fun. We still wanted to have that playful, to have a playful feeling to it, and so we knew there was a spectrum, and we talked a lot about like, where do we want to fall as far as the look and as far as the animation goes, and then you kind of pick that point, and then collectively we all try to make sure that we're staying in that range. So it's for any animated movie, it becomes a critical topic of conversation. And I think that was what it came down to, is just trying to find that balance.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Vina?
All right. So my question is, for both of you, what is the biggest takeaway moment or food for thought you want kids to have when they leave the theater?
Oh, you want to take that one, Zaris?
Um,
You want me to go first?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
As far as like the you're asking about a big moment or a big idea? You're talking about specifically a moment in the movie?
I mean, it could be a moment, but like when kids leave the theater, like, is there like a point that you want them to think about, or is there like just something that you're like, I really hope they take this idea away?
Okay. I think for kids, but really for all audiences, because we didn't think of this as specifically just for kids. You know, this was a movie that I wanted for people like myself to enjoy. You know, and I think that thematically, I think it's nice sometimes when movies are about more than one thing. Sometimes it can just feel a little bit tight and rigid if it's isolated to just one theme. So we have multiple themes, and I definitely invite people to take from it whatever they will, you know. And so we talked about the fact that, to me, there are multiple ideas. At the same time, you should be able to articulate what would you say is the central key idea. And for me, it was about this notion of a circle of aggression, and how what the things that sometimes feed into that, and how difficult it is to break away from that. And there are characters in this movie that are trapped in this endless cycle of aggression and vengeance, and they need to find a way out. And that to me is the thing that I wanted people to perhaps think about. Oh, it's a very cute kid there you have. That was definitely part of our lives. We did this movie during the pandemic, right? So for almost 2 years, I was sitting in this chair looking at the screen, and we had cats and dogs and kids invading our meetings constantly. And I have to say, it wasn't the worst thing, you know, had that little break. But anyway, so that I think was probably the main idea, is sometimes there can be this vicious cycle that perpetuates itself, and then how do you break away from that?
Thank you.
Back to Melissa.
Darius, I want to know, what was the most challenging part of playing this character for you? Voicing this character and playing it.
Challenging part. Well, I think this film is action packed, so there's a lot of efforts that go into it. So I think the most challenging part was we did, at the end of every session, we do effort sounds. So that's basically running, jumping, all the action parts where I had to sound like I'm running, but I'm not actually running, or So I think those were quite hard to do, because sometimes I wasn't sure if it would sound right, or because I'm not actually running or anything. But luckily, everyone was very, very kind and patient. But that was most challenging, doing all the effort sounds, not actually the lines, but actually the sounds in between.
That is a thing that, especially with this movie, which it's an action-packed movie, it's very physical. And so we'd have these 3 or 4 hour recording sessions, and then the actors think they're off the hook, and they're like, no, now we're going to do the efforts. So now you have to pretend to be falling off a cliff, or being smashed by a monster, or hurling a harpoon, or whatever it is. And so, and that can be really exhausting, and they have to have a certain amount of self-confidence to not feel silly just going, oh, over and over again for, 20 minutes.
Thank you.
Angela?
This question is for Zaris. What do you want your audience to take away with after seeing this film? And what do you want them to learn from Maisie?
I think what Chris said earlier about how definitely violence and revenge can overcome you. and it's very easy to get trapped in that. Like one of the characters just gets so trapped in that world of just revenge that he doesn't see what's happening to the people around him, and what he's actually doing can cost him in the future. That's something my parents always taught me. The way you are today will impact your tomorrow. So I think that's something to really take from it. And in terms of Maisie being young, you still do have a voice. Obviously, the way you use it, still be, approachable, still be a nice person. But if something is making you uncomfortable or unhappy, it's okay to voice that out. Something I've had to learn. Even being 18, I'm still learning it. But I really do hope Maisie does give a lot of kids that confidence, but in a nice way. Still be nice, but it's okay to also have your own thoughts and your own mind and feelings too.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that Zaris brought was the character has this real dogged determination, and her worldview, sort of her understanding of the world evolves over the course of the story, but she's always driven towards what she believes is right. But her sense of what is right changes over the course of the story. And because she's the youngest, there's sort of 3 generations of hunters in this movie, and she's the youngest of the 3 generations. She represents the younger generation that's a little bit more nimble, perhaps, in her thinking, and able to adapt to the facts on the ground more readily than some of the other ones. And so I love that Zaris was able to bring that to the character. This idea of this absolute certainty that she needs to propel herself towards the right thing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yami?
So Chris, you've created all these characters and everything. Do you have a favorite sea beast or a favorite character that you're able to relate to?
Okay. Well, I really was happy with how Red turned out from a pantomime perspective. We didn't want to anthropomorphize Red too much. We didn't want to just make her behave like a human, and yet you needed to be able to understand what she was thinking and how she was feeling over the course of the story. And so I really like where that even though it was sort of contained as far as an acting approach for Red, I think it was nice that people were able to really empathize and connect with her. As far as the characters go, I'm always driven to a dynamic between 2 characters, because no character is interesting just sitting in a room by themselves, right? You're always thinking like, how do these 2 characters, how are they foils for each other? How do they bring out the best in each other? And so for me, the dynamic between Carl's character and Zaris's character, Jacob and Maisie, that was the thing, like they had to be great together. And the way that she pushes his buttons, and the way he's this big, powerful guy, but she has him back on his heels right away. Really, for the run of the movie, she's running circles around him. And there's something very fun about that. And I think very potent in the emotional connection that they form over the course of the story.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Amy?
So Chris, one of my favorite things in any movie is the Easter eggs. And with this coming to Netflix, we're going to be able to watch it over and over again to catch them all. But I would love it if you could point out maybe a few places we should be on the lookout.
This was a movie where I was trying to avoid. I've been in other movies where we put very literal Easter eggs. Like there's a thing in this movie that is from another movie, and with this one, I was very conscious of the idea of not breaking the spell. I really wanted people to get immersed in this world. So there's nothing in the way of literal Easter eggs like that, but there are a couple places where we have nods to Jaws, very specifically shots that are, you could sort of say, oh, there's a threatening thing that's in the ocean. It's all a nod to Jaws, but there are a couple shots that specifically are referencing Jaws. So I will say that.
That's perfect. Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vina?
Hi. Okay. So there's a big theme in here for me about figuring things out yourself, which as a mom is a big thing that I try to teach my kids. Is that something that you learned from your parents or like infused into your life? Like, how does that theme work for both you and Zaris?
You want to go first, Zaris, or you want me to start?
You can start.
Okay. Yeah, I think I think certainly the Maisie character is emblematic of that idea. She starts to see things that don't jive with her what she's been taught, and she starts to probe deeper into that and starts to uncover some new truths. And she does take that upon herself. You know, she almost launches an exploration of her own, and forges kind of a new framework for herself. And I said it earlier, but I think I think younger people tend to be better at that, at adapting to new situations as we get older. I know this. We tend to get a little more set in our ways, and it's harder to sort of upset our pillars of understanding, you know. And so I think that the Maisie character, I agree, I think very much embodies that idea.